thank you. I am happy to be here. Um, as was said, I'm an architect living and working right here in Salt Lake City. My topic today is discovering classical architecture on my own, with a subtitle of maybe in spite of my education. My thesis is this: I'm a regular guy with a modernist architectural education and background. I don't fancy myself as the avant-garde, an extremist, or an exclusionist. I'm really a pretty regular guy. But I have had the good fortune of working on some really great projects, better than I deserve, no doubt. And I've had the opportunity to do a lot of good work for a really wonderful client who cares about their historic building inventory. I want to share with you my simple journey to a love of classical architecture. The sub-theme of my message is this quote by David Broussard, who I hope to meet someday, about joy in traditional architecture, that it's instinctive and it's easy for us. And this is my story. It might be similar to yours even. I went to school in this magnificent, brutalist concrete and brick building, which I came to love and loathe. The professor I had the very most was a disciple and former employee of Mies van der Rohe. If your project didn't look in some way or another like the Seagram building in some form or another, you were publicly criticized and penalized. I took architectural history classes in the normal way, in a dark auditorium looking at slides, and then it was never mentioned again ever. Postmodernism was in full swing in the early 80s at the University of Utah. We took class trips to see Michael Graves' library in San Juan Capistrano and the municipal building in Portland, Oregon. In the middle of this poster appeared on the bulletin board at the University of Utah. And I let it sit there for a couple of days, and then I stole it. And then I bought this book. Now my thesis project, this sketch makes me laugh today. I was thinking more traditional, but everybody else, including my thesis advisor, was thinking postmodern. And it became somewhat controversial in the school. It was trendy and fashionable, and I knew my thesis advisor would fall on a sword to get this thesis passed. So I gamed the system, milked that poor guy for all I could, and got myself passed. Thankfully, I was hired by these good people 30 years ago this year. And here I've had the opportunity to work on some wonderful historic buildings, to be taught by these buildings about architecture and design. Today I want to share with you some projects I've worked on and the things I've learned. This is the Hotel Utah building, now the Joseph Smith Memorial Building. A short, quick 6 blocks up the street, which is a mile, by the way. And some of you saw this yesterday on the bus tour. I love this building. It was built in 1911, designed by Parkinson and Bergstrom out of Los Angeles, California. In 1973, while I was still cruising in high school, the firm I work for now did a big addition on the building and used consistent and matching materials and detailing and gave this building a unity and a symmetry to the shape, made it a noble building. This is all contrary to the Secretary of the Interior standards for rehabilitation, and this decision is still criticized today among some people. In 1993, we did a big remodel, seismic upgrade, office building conversion, and an interior makeover. This really is a magnificent, magnificent building, elegant and beautiful, and has a real good spirit and feel in the building. I highly recommend you go there. It has a richness of detail and finish that is really not found in many places today. I was 6.5 years on this project. I gauge the age and timing of my children's birth by this project, because many of it happened while I was engaged here. I fell in love with old buildings in spite of my education. Next, I worked on the Vernal, Utah temple for the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. Now, a temple in the LDS Church is not a large congregational hall, but it's a series of smaller instructional rooms where the church members go for their highest and most sacred rites of worship and for marriages. This building, built in 1908 in Vernal, Utah, 3 hours east of here, is a simple and beautiful little building. Our task was to convert it to a temple for the church. Now, our work was a pretty aggressive project, but time spent drawing and studying this old building was rich and wonderful. It guided the design of the interior and the extensive exterior addition. Another building from the same time period, the Noise Administration Building at Snow College, about 2 hours south of here in Ephraim, Utah. It's another beautiful building built in 1908, and another pretty aggressive remodel project to repurpose and rebuild and to seismically strengthen and preserve the building. So I was taught a lot by these historic buildings, and I learned to listen to them. I didn't really know another way, and in my naivete, I just listened to them and tried to follow their lead. I was just trying to do what's right and respect these grand old buildings. What feels right? What might they have done? I was trying to be careful. There are so many bad examples of interventions into historic environments. They are sad and thoughtless. It's especially bad when it becomes intellectualized thoughtlessness. Often they don't know any better, and they're frankly misled by someone who said they should be different. So in the meantime, we've got work to do. A few more projects to talk about. This is the Mormon temple in Nauvoo, Illinois, which is a long ways away from nowhere. It's 3 hours from St. Louis, it's 5 hours from Kansas City, it's 5 hours from Chicago. It's on the very western tip of Illinois on the edge of the mighty Mississippi. The building was originally built in 1846 with the blood, sweat, and tears of my pioneer ancestors. It was designed by William Weeks, the architect, with input and direction from the church leader, Joseph Smith. But this building was lost to the church. It had a devastating fire in 1848, 2 years later. And then a tornado came in 1850 and knocked down the other walls 2 more years later. And it stood as a ruin like this for about 20 years. Our task was to recreate this building on the outside and have it be a functioning temple on the inside. So we researched the few existing drawings, and we looked at all the stone fragments we could find. And we looked at other period buildings, both within and outside of the church. The new building is a concrete framed building clad with stone, intended to last for 500 years. The textures on the stone are as close as we could get to the historic textures on the stone. This was a great team effort, and I especially want to acknowledge the contribution of my friend and colleague, Stephen Goodwin. Right in the middle of this, I discovered Traditional Building magazine. And there they had this award thing, and so we went after it. We won the Plaudio Award. Yay! I thought it was great. And even better, we made the cover of the magazine. So I went to the conference that year in Baltimore. I saved the program. This conference saved my life, changed my life. We received the award. I met the almighty Clem Levine. I met Christine Frank. And I got to visit and talk to people who cared about this. I visited the table of what was then called, I think, ICA. And I bought my first copy of the Classicist Journal. It it changed my life. I attended a seminar on classical interiors taught by Stephen Sims. And he shared with us an outline from this book, soon to be out at the time, that changed me. Where was I? Where had I been? I'd been lost in my own world. I had no idea that people were thinking about this. These are the things I'd been thinking of. I had no idea. I was clueless. Okay? But this opened up a whole new world to me. It was more interesting, more thoughtful, better drawings, more fun, and more joy for me personally. But in the meantime, we got to get some work done. We had the opportunity to work on these twin office buildings behind the Utah State Capitol building. The Capitol is a magnificent building designed in 1915 by local architect Richard Cletting. It is a beautiful building, set up on a hill at the top of State Street, just 6 or 8 short blocks away. The original master plan had a quad of buildings that were intended to be built, and at some point they built the one at the back, and our task was to build the two flanking buildings. Now the one at the back was a very, very modern building. Our task was to build these 2 flanking buildings. This magnificent watercolor was by my friend and colleague Paul Brown. We heard that Richard Cletting, when he designed the Capitol building, had a copy of Vignola. So I bought one. And in a moment of hilarity, Paul Brown and I, working as the owner's representative architect, we knew that the columns and the pilasters needed to have entasis. We knew that word, but we didn't know how to exactly construct it. So in a classic case of the blind leading the hopelessly uninformed, we found a drawing that seemed to show how to construct the entasis on the column. But it was in French, which neither of us spoke. So we launched into our best Pepe Le Pew voice and read the French words, hoping we could find something that sounded familiar. And then we could reverse engineer from that how to actually construct the entasis, which we did. Palladio and Vignola both describe it, but they didn't tell you exactly how to construct it. So it takes a lot of work to get a building built. Lots of drawings and sketches and lots of details. But boy, it is fun to see it get built. I was so happy to be thinking and talking about history and theory and big ideas again. I'm trying to teach myself about classicism and traditional architecture. Steve Goodwin and I felt like we were just slogging around in the dark. We didn't know what we didn't know. We had no one to teach us but ourselves. The Bible in the book of Acts records the story of the apostle Philip, who meets a stranger reading an ancient text, and he asks him, "Do you understand?" And he says, "How can I except someone should guide me?" I have felt this way. I felt like we'd been held from this because we didn't know where to find it. So I started buying books, which is a dangerous habit. I started collecting reference photos, tearing them out of magazines and things, of beautiful buildings. I didn't even know those reference photos had a name. I started collecting articles and quotes and information and finding more and more resources. But in the meantime, we got to get some work done. We were able to have the singular privilege of working on the historic Salt Lake Tabernacle. A big seismic upgrade. I hope you all went to the choir rehearsal last night. And if not, I hope you can stick around for Sunday morning for the broadcast. It's a magnificent building, originally built in 1867. Frank Lloyd Wright called it one of the architectural masterpieces of the country and perhaps the world. It is an engineering marvel. It is magnificent. We brought this model, and it's on display in there just so that you can see the scope of, and get a hint of the scope of the work. It was a big seismic upgrade and infrastructure project. This building is so beautiful and so simple. Next, I got to work on this sweet little building, the LDS Temple on the North Shore of Oahu in Hawaii. This was built in 1919. It was designed by a couple of Salt Lake City architects. Our work was mostly cosmetic, inside and out. We had to undo a couple of unfortunate remodels and additions, but we did some structural and mechanical work, but mostly it was just being careful with this little jewel. We're trying to learn all this stuff on our own. Trying to learn how to think and design this new way. I was not taught this in school. I started looking for help and buying more books, as if that was the answer. I started looking for the principles of design, not just the proper application of the parts and pieces. There are a lot of good books for that. But I wanted to know how to do it and why. Two books especially stand out in my mind. Robert Chittim's The Classical Orders of Architecture, where this image came from, and Robert Adam, Classical Architecture. These two books, out of all of the books I'd read, spoke in just a few small chapters about big picture design concepts, and this inspired me. I wanted more, and I couldn't find it anywhere, so I set out on my own to get it. I decided to make my own list of guiding design principles, big picture design concepts. I might be sticking my neck out in this crowd especially, but I want to share with you what I've learned. I'm not trying to preach or teach anything to anybody. I just want to share with you what I've learned. It's not everything. It's not complete. It's rough. Have I given you enough disclaimers? It's just a place to start. The depth and breadth of classical architecture is huge, and it's more than a lifetime worth of study and reading and thought and sketching and practice. So I share the outline here, but I've got copies of the actual text available as you leave the room if you're interested in taking one. General principles of classical architecture. These have a wide application to all architecture, and especially style. The good doctor from Colorado spoke of this. Style is a tough concept for us crazy modern architects. The use of precedent. Building design principles. These are the kinds of things I was after in the first place. Symmetry, axis, massing, proportion, hierarchy, clarity of circulation systems, materiality, a pet peeve of mine, the honest and appropriate use of materials. Detail and ornament, moldings, the building blocks of what we do, the orders, their proportions, and their appropriate use. The classical interiors. This is taken almost cold from the handout that Stephen Sims gave us at that lecture in March of 2003 in Baltimore, with some of my own thoughts. These are just my thoughts, and these have been helpful to me and my colleagues in my office as we've talked about these things, and I hope it can be helpful to you as basic principles. I want to finish with two more projects. This is the Philadelphia, Pennsylvania Temple for the LDS Church. This is right off Logan Circle in downtown Philadelphia. On these temple projects, we work closely with the designers and architects for the LDS Church. They're a sophisticated client. They know what they want. They know how to build. We work closely with them to develop the designs. And I have learned so much from them. I am grateful for their help and guidance. I really enjoy working with them, and I count them as friends. This is the approved rendering. It's still in construction yet, so this is all there is. And a couple of detail shots of this rendering. This is going to be a magnificent building, clad in a light gray granite. It is really going to be something. But you know, the effort, the design starts with some sketches. And it takes a lot. There's a lot to think about and a lot to figure out. The sketches turn into the Revit model, which turns into the construction documents, which gets it built. These are a couple weeks old maybe, and you can see the construction of this thing in the context of the city. It is going to be magnificent. Should be completed in 2016. Last project, the temple in Hartford, Connecticut. This is a beautiful building, so quiet, and sweet. This is also clad in granite, a much whiter, lighter color. But it also takes a lot of sketches. This is hard work. It doesn't just fall off of me like it does some people. And it's hard to get it built right in the end. And this thing is in construction and will be done at the end of 2015. So the goal is to make something beautiful and to find that joy that we spoke of. My plea, please teach me and teach future generations the relevance and importance of history. Teach me what it means, how to use it, how it can help. Teach it in the design studios, not just looking at slides in a dark classroom. Teach me the interconnectedness of it all. It's hard to learn this on your own. Teach me a sensitivity to historic buildings. There are so many bad interventions in historic buildings. These are painful to me. We must be more thoughtful and more careful. And remember, the greenest building, if you need to be green, is the one that is already built. Teach me something in architecture school about traditional architecture. Teach me the basic principles. And let me see the beauty and find joy. Thank you very much.